I'll call this meeting to order on Monday, September the 19th, 2016. I want to welcome everyone. Tonight we have with us amongst the crowd is Pastor Joel Smith of the Smyrna Presbyterian Church. He's the new pastor, and I thought that was you, 3130 Atlanta Road. He's going to give our invocation and also lead us in the pledge to the flag, so welcome. And
my pleasure. If you please rise, let us pray. Oh God, you are great and greatly to be praised. We thank you this day for who you are, that you are the creator and maker of all things, including us, O Lord, the chief of your creation. We thank you that you are the provider of all things. You provide the sun and the rain. You provide us also with our daily bread. We thank you that you are the sustainer of all things. There's not a molecule that is out of your sovereign control and care. Thank you that you are the source of all things, for in you we live and move and have our being. Lord, we come before you this night humbly. How can we not, in the light of who you are? We come dependent upon you. We come crying out to you, praying to you, O Lord. We pray for this great city of Smyrna, Georgia. We thank you for its 144 years of history, for those that have gone before us and on the shoulders on whom we stand. We pray, O Lord, that our best days would be ahead of us. We pray for our mayor, for our councilmen and women this night. We ask that you would give them wisdom, insight, and discernment to lead the people of Smyrna, Georgia. Give them the leadership that they need, O Lord, that they would do so out of a willing and servant heart that only you can give. Lord, we pray for our first responders this night, for 9/11, for the fire, for the police. Pray that you would protect them, that you would watch over them, that you allow them to make the decisions necessary to uphold justice in our city and provide peace and safety to our people. We pray for the city workers that make this a functional and beautiful community, one that we can be proud of. Pray for our businesses, existing, new, and those yet to come. Through these, Lord, may they help us to provide our needs, as well as to provide a service and product to our fellow man. We do pray for the fuel shortage at this time. We pray that this would not be a hindrance to our community. Lord, we pray for our churches and our community centers and other ministries around our town that minister to spiritual needs. For, Lord, we are body and soul, and we must take heed and care of both. Oh God, you are good. Pray for your benevolence to reign upon us, that we, the people of Smyrna, may rise up and praise you and bless your name with thankfulness and gratitude in our heart to you. I pray this all in the name of my Lord and Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. And let us now do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
those folks that are looking for a new church or just moved into town, I'm sure the folks at Smyrna First Presbyterian love to have you. They're right on Atlanta Road at Collier Drive. So you did a great job. You almost did a complete sermon. So.
If you need me to do that, Mayor, I can do that too.
We'll wait till this is over. Agenda changes. We do have one agenda change. Item 8C, 8F will be moved to formal business item 6C. That's the approval of guaranteed maximum price for the historic Reed House Event Center. F 2016-380 be moved to formal business. We may have some candidates that are running for election. Hunter Hill, I believe, is here. Any other candidate? Hunter, you can come on up if you want to take a quick minute to say whatever you want to say, and I do mean quick. So.
I'll be very quick. I really was coming more to just say hello, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your leadership and counsel. Y'all have done a great job for our city, and I'm grateful to you for that. I've been proud to represent this community for the last 4 years in the state senate, and I would certainly be honored for the support of the council and the community, the voters, for another term. And really, again, though, just wanted to come and say hello. Things are going very well in our state. We've just dipped below 4.9% unemployment. Economy's growing, jobs are expanding in our state, and I believe the same to be true in Smyrna. I hope that's accurate. But y'all have been quiet. I hadn't heard much from y'all except for on the firework issue, which is a legitimate issue. And one of the things people aren't talking as much on that issue is it's not just dogs, it's not just people trying to sleep, but soldiers with PTSD as well is an issue. And so it's a concern of mine. I chair the Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security Committee. So just want y'all to know, and our voters as well, that I'm going to continue to work on that. Originally, it was drafted more with the rural parts of the state in mind. So, but that's one issue. I also serve as chairman of the Finance Committee, so I deal with tax policy and other things. But just want to be a resource and helpful to this community. If there's anything that we can do to help Smyrna continue to grow and be successful from the state level, I'd be happy to continue to partner with you. So thank you very much for your time.
And how many more days to the election? I hear it every day.
I think it's about 50 days.
50 days, yeah.
And early voting starts really early this year. It's in early October. So.
And election day is what? November the
8th.
November 8th, okay.
30 days out. So it's 30 days out prior to the election day. But again, I appreciate y'all's leadership and again, proud to serve this community in partnership with you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Hunter. Hunter Hill. Anyone else that's running for public office? Okay. That's all that we have we used to put that on the mayoral report. Item 4 is land issue, zonings, and annexation. A is 2015-168, public hearing zoning request Z15-007, rezoning from R20 to RAD conditional for the development of 14 single-family homes, 5.61 acre land lot 338-3744, Plumcrest Road. Sean Tennell is the applicant. I'll get the background from Mr. Jones first, so I think he may pass this on to our city attorney tonight.
Yes, sir. I'll go ahead and do that.
Microphone.
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'll go ahead and do that. If we could have Jeffrey provide the background for the zoning request.
Yeah, our city attorney, Mr. Cochran, conveniently decided he wouldn't be here tonight, so Jeffrey Tucker is here. And Jeffrey, if you give the background on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because this is a matter that's been on the radar of the city for a little while with some procedural matters that involve the legal system, the mayor has asked me to just go through the procedure that's taken us up to this point. Mr. Tennell originally submitted this application. You'll see from its number that it's a 2015 application, relatively early last year. And it was originally for 15 single-family homes under a site plan that was submitted at that time. Procedurally, it went through the regular course of procedure. At that time, it was heard, considered by city staff, heard by the Planning and Zoning Board in July of last year, who approved it 5-2. It moved along its course as usual to mayor and council. Was heard just over a year ago on the 8th of September of last year. Mayor and council denied the application by a vote of 4-3. Then the applicant, Mr. Tennell, exercising his rights, filed a complaint in the Superior Court of Cobb County, asserting various matters and asking for various kinds of relief. That was on the 15th of September. The city, 1 month later, on October the 15th, filed its answer. If you've ever been involved up at Superior Court, you know that things at that point start to run quite slowly. Just before Christmas, the Superior Court, acting under Superior Court rules that are applicable here in our jurisdiction, referred this matter for mandatory alternative dispute resolution. So civil cases of this sort, which raise these kinds of questions, you don't go straight to trial and have a trial in front of a jury. You're referred over into what's known as the ADR system, alternative dispute resolution. There are various options for that, but the one that was selected in this case was a formal kind of mediation. There was an agreement between counsel for the applicant, which Garvis Sams, you'll hear from Mr. Sams in a little while, and counsel for the city of Smyrna, our city attorney Scott Cochran, as to the selection of a mediator. The mediator that was selected was former Georgia Supreme Court Justice Conley Ingram, and for those of you who have been around here in Cobb County for a while, there is no one in the state of Georgia who one could hope to have a better mediator for any sort of matter, especially one that raises complex questions, than Conley Ingram. Judge Ingram met with the parties, and after some consultation, there were, I think, 2 formal sessions of mediation between all of the parties, including the mayor, members of the city council, city staff, city attorney's office on the city side, Mr. Tentle, the developer, Mr. Sams, or other attorneys in his office, and Judge Conley Ingram. I believe those sessions were in February and then again in May. And all the while, there were conversations continuing between the parties as to the resolution of this matter. The parties, apart from Judge Ingram, again formally met, I think, in June and again in August. And at some point along the way, Mr. Tentle submitted a new plan with 14 single-family houses on the parcel rather than 15. The exact site plan had the lots shifted around, and some of the other issues that had come up were addressed. But as part of the mediation, the parties agreed that this new application under the site plan that's for consideration by mayor and council tonight, with 14 lots or 14 single-family homes on the plans that are existed, or as submitted, would be submitted back to Smyrna Mayor and Council for new consideration this evening. This matter under the new plan was not required to go back in front of the Planning and Zoning Board. The city's zoning ordinance states that if the proposed rezoning is initiated by the city, that you can skip the part going before Planning and Zoning and have a straight consideration by Mayor and Council. So I hope that's sufficient background as to the procedure.
Okay. Is the applicant is here? This is a public hearing. If there's anyone here that's in opposition to, or that would like to make any public comment concerning this application, you need to come forward at this time and be sworn in. Yep. And even if you just think you want to make a comment and then you don't have to, I really want to get everybody sworn in all at one time. So just don't be afraid to get sworn in. Yeah, y'all can come up a little closer. That's. Yeah, y'all can do it from right there. If y'all, Lily, yeah. Okay, if y'all have a seat. And I want, before I forget one more time, Doug Stoner is not here. He's not actually on his way. He had a little small family emergency that prevented him from being here on time, so he's on his way. I'll ask, this is in Mr. Corky Welch's district, September the 8th of 2015. When we first heard it, it was actually in Ward 7, now it's in Ward 4. So, and I hope that Jeffrey gave enough background as to why we're back here after over a year. It's because we were in court and mediation. So I'll ask that Mr. Corky Welch go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Ken Sudworth to come up and give a little engineering background and related issues at this point. Thank you.
A lot of the information has already been given out, but what's on the screen, if we can switch, there you go. This did start in 2015 as stated, went through the P&Z hearing. They ultimately approved it in July. with a 5-2 vote, which has been said, and obviously Mayor and Council heard it September 8th of last year with a denial. So tonight is the rehearing on this, so it's just a continuation of that original request. So the site plan part of that application has changed, and now indeed does have 14 lots associated with it. Again, here is the subject property that is outlined. Currently it has 2 single-family residences. The proposed use is to subdivide it, put in a new street, and end up with 14 new single-family residents. The existing zoning is R20, and obviously the proposed zoning is RAD conditional, which was requested previously as well. In terms of the future development map, both the existing and proposed land use are suburban residential, so there's no change there. And as you can see, it is northeast, south, and west is all suburban residential as well. This is the proposed site plan that we are currently operating with. I will use some fly-ins to illustrate the most important features on this plan, because it is a little bit difficult to read. There is a 10-foot tree preservation easement all around the property that is proposed. There is a storm water management facility in the location that's outlined in the blue rectangle there. And the stormwater management improvement necessary to control water off of that would indeed go down Plumcrest Road to Highview Drive. The proposed open space, which is a requirement of our ordinance, what they proposed here meets that requirement, and it also contains a 10 by 14 pavilion, as well as the mail kiosk, which is a new requirement in the last year or two by the U.S. Post Office. Anything beyond the right-of-way is proposed to be dedicated to the adjoining landowners in the area that's shown on the screen up at the entrance at North Cooper Lake. So that is obviously we cannot force the adjacent property owners to accept that. So, but what this is a proposed dedication, provided that those adjacent property owners want it. Here are proposed home elevations from the front. There are requirements which we will get to explaining the type of materials to be used. A couple pictures of the subject property. Then these are the adjacent properties. Now, the current staff recommendation is, again, this is coming out of mediation, a new plan submitted, staff reviews it, and then it's coming directly back to Mayor and Council. But staff is recommending that this plan be approved for the 14 single family residents at a density of 2.6 units per acre with the standard conditions. With the exception of requirements 8 and 17 from Section 1201 of our zoning code. And as you remember, the zoning code outlines a whole list of standard conditions that run with any of these types of requests that become conditional in nature. We are moving these forward so that everybody understands that these conditions still apply. Whether we say that or not, the ordinance covers it. We have found that it is beneficial to outline those requirements. So the composition of the homes and the vegetative buffer requirements and protective covenants, open space, the stormwater, some of which we have already talked about. All of those are moving forward and are required with this request. Now, there are also special conditions which specifically deal with this request itself, meaning that from a setback standpoint, the minimum setbacks for the front are 30 feet, interior side is 5, the exterior is 25 feet, and the rear is 30 feet. Now, the development shall have a minimum lot size of 8,350 square feet. I do want to say that that doesn't mean every single lot is at 8,350. It just means that the smallest lot can be no lower than 8,350. Proposed home shall have a minimum floor area of 2,100 square feet, and that the 14 new homes shall be accessed from the new proposed public road. Developer shall provide a 5-foot sidewalk with a 2-foot grass buffer inside and outside the subdivision, meaning on the new street that's proposed, as well as the little bit that has frontage on North Cooper. The driveway lengths have to be 22 feet. You've seen these kind of requirements in the past, as well as have 2-car garages with decorative doors. The developer is responsible for any water and sewer improvements that are deemed necessary, as well as they are responsible for any stormwater improvements deemed necessary by the city engineer. No stormwater management facility or any portion of that shall be located on any of the proposed lots, meaning it is on a separate lot that will be managed by the HOA. Excuse me. Developer shall also provide a 10-foot landscape buffer along the perimeter of the property. I did illustrate that with one of those fly-ins. All trees within the limits of disturbance that are not within a tree protection area would be removed during the clearing and grading phase of the development. Approval of the plan is contingent upon the information that they have recently submitted to us. So that the red is there, done intentionally to highlight the 8/26/2016 plan created by Ridge Planning and Engineer. That's the one that you have in front of you, as well as the elevations that we showed you for 8/26/2016 as well. Any approvals of those elevations have to go through the Community Development Department and receive approval for myself as the director of the department with that. So with that said, I'll leave you with the proposed site plan, but staff does recommend approval of this request as submitted today.
Any questions, Mr. Sudrith?
I have no other questions at this time. We may talk a little bit later. I would like to bring up the developer and let him give his side of the developer and the owner to explain their side of the story and hear what they have to say. Mr. Sams?
Thank you, Councilmember Welch.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, also Mr. Jones and Mr. Tucker as well. My name is Garvis Sams. I represent the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Sean Tintle, in connection with this application for rezoning and the subsequent settlement of litigation through mediation as described by Mr. Tucker. Mr. Tintle is here with me this evening, seated in the front row, along with his father and some other colleagues that are involved in zoning. Is your wife here? No. Okay. His wife's not here tonight, but both they and I'll be available to respond to any questions at the appropriate time should you have any, Mr. Welch. This is an application, and I don't want to reiterate what either Mr. Tucker or Mr. Jones or Mr. Sudrith has said, but I think I need to kind of tee it up in terms of why we're here without going over all the procedural aspects. But this is an application that was heard, considered by you just a little over a year ago. And it came before you having received a favorable recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board, actually 2 hearings before the Planning and Zoning Board. Ultimately, the recommendation was a 5-2 vote to approve to a total number of 15 homes. Also, the staff at that time, I think, was the impetus of the recommendation from the Planning Commission with respect to the number of homes, and contained very similarly some of the provisions you see tonight, specifically with respect to the standard stipulations. Some of the special stipulations have of course changed, as has the tenor of the development and as has the product that was originally proposed. However, after the momentum, if you want to call it that was established with staff's recommendation for support, the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval, at a public hearing on September 8th before the Mayor and City Council, in a differently constituted council than we have now, voted and split vote 4-3 to deny the zoning of Mr. and Mrs. Tintle's application. After the denial on September 8th, within a week, we filed, having raised the proper constitutional issues before you, we filed a complaint and de novo appeal, or just shorthand an appeal, in the Superior Court of Cobb County, challenging that decision. As Mr. Tucker has stated, all civil cases that are filed in the Superior Court of Cobb County, maybe absent a few unique examples, are required to go through mandatory alternative dispute resolution that can either be mediation, arbitration, or a number of different methodologies between your city attorney and I, after the city attorney consulted with you as a mayor and city council, determined that mediation with a splash of case evaluation would be appropriate. I say a splash of case evaluation because there could not be a better mediator or alternative dispute resolution specialist, as Mr. Tucker said, than former justice and now senior court judge in the Superior Court of Cobb County, Conley Ingram. He literally wrote some of the seminal opinions that occurred in the 70s regarding the law applicable to zoning cases. We have mediated the case, and as Mr. Tucker advised you on several different occasions, it's not that we couldn't complete the work, it was just that it was an evolving process, not only with respect to Judge Ingram's understanding of the circumstances, but also an effort to involve different members of the city's professional staff, the city attorney, and certain members of the council, as well as Mayor Bacon. Tonight, the Tindalls are seeking a rezoning of the same property from R20 to RAD conditional. They actually started out in the original proposal with 16 homes. By the time they got to the Planning Commission, they had reduced that to 15 based on staff's recommendation and recommendation for approval. Tonight, it's not 16, it's not 15. They've scaled it back to 14 homes, as Mr. Sudworth has stated. These are 14 single-family residential detached homes at a density of 2.6 units per acre. The property is in an area under your future development or future land use map that's denominated as suburban residential, which allows densities up to 3 units per acre. So we're well within the range of densities that are allowed. And there won't need to be any kind of a change to the future land use map or the development map, because we meet the requirements of the suburban residential designation under that, even though zoned R20. Now, if zoned the RAD conditional, it will still meet that future land use map designation. Right now, our engineers have done a plan, or plans rather, that show that this property can presently be developed for 12 lots, or 12 homes. This has been confirmed by the city staff, and so right now, Mr. and Mrs. Tintle could come in, apply for developmental permits without going through the entitlement, the zoning process, and build 12 homes on the property. However, by proceeding as we have through an organized, well-orchestrated mediation and submitting themselves to the jurisdiction, once again, of the mayor and council, that's given the city an opportunity to attach stipulations and conditions. There's the standard stipulations, and then there are the special stipulations and conditions, which Mr. Sudworth has gone over. I can unequivocally state that Mr. and Mrs. Tintle are in acquiescence to those both special and standard stipulations and conditions. The staff has also stated that the proposal is consistent with respect to setbacks and lot sizes concerning infill developments within this corridor, within this sub-area of the city. And if you look at your zoning analysis, what they've done, rather ingenuously I might add, is put together a table of information which represents a salient comparison between the Tintle proposal and other developments in the immediate area, for instance in Austin Lake subdivision, North Cooper Lake Place, the park at North Cooper Lake Place, and Tackett Farm. So that's available to you as the first, I think, table in your zoning analysis. Additionally, the city staff also wanted to look not only at setbacks, lot sizes, but also wanted to look at densities, the number of lots, and the Tintle proposal as presently constituted, which is before you tonight, actually is better positioned in terms of a density perspective than the other subdivisions, all of which were over 2.6 units per acre. And that I'm talking about is Westbrook Park, the park at North Cooper Lake Place. All three of these have higher densities, and these are all infill projects, much like the Tintle proposal this evening. As I mentioned, the Tintles are agreeable to all the proposals submitted by staff in their totality. There are 28 of those conditions, stipulations. Oftentimes, either applicants or developers will submit, in addition to staff's recommendations and analysis, an additional stipulation letter. But in looking at this, staff has covered the waterfront with respect to all of the different conditions or stipulations that will become conditions and binding upon the subject property. So there is not a separate stipulation letter. This proposed high-end single-family detached residential development is conditioned upon the development in substantial conformity to the revised site plan that Mr. Sudworth showed you a bit ago, that was submitted on August the 26th. Concurrently with that submission, renderings, elevations, again, as Mr. Sudworth has shown you, we will have to be in substantial compliance with those, both as to all four sides of the homes and as to the architectural style and composition, and in terms of the actual construction of the homes themselves. Of course, as I mentioned, there's 28 special conditions and stipulations. One of the things that's agreed upon, and I don't think it's within those, and that has to do with the exhibit Mr. Sudworth showed you, that the property on either side of the roadway entering into the subject property, which is known as will be known as Beach Haven Drive, there's surplus property on either side of that as it approaches the Tintle property, or at least in terms of the Tintle property where the homes will be built. We've agreed to deed both of those surplus sides of the road to the adjacent property owners, but only if they're desirous of receiving this additional land. There may be reasons they are not, but we are prepared to voluntarily convey those. So in all respects, this is appropriate on numerous levels. Number one, from the city's future land use development plan or future land use map. Number two, the city staff has once again recommended approval. Number three, this is the product of numerous negotiations, not only with your staff and with you as a mayor and council, but also with the mediator as well. It provides the underlying threshold that would place Mr. and Mrs. Tintle in a position, if approved tonight, to dismiss the pending litigation in Cobb Superior Court. So for all these reasons, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Welch, Mr. Jones, Mr. Tucker, and other members of the council, we do respectfully request that you approve this application as submitted to you by your staff and as recommended by your staff for approval. Mr. Tintle and others are here tonight along with me to respond to any questions, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Welch, that you may have at the appropriate juncture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sams. I have a question. I guess probably Mr. Tintle is going to be the one that's probably going to need to answer this.
Sure.
Mr. Tintle, you and I have spoken regarding several of these issues. Would you step up, please?
Let me swear him in, if that's okay, Mr. Welch. You solemnly swear in the affirmative testimony you think he'll be truth, whole truth, and nothing truth, help you God. I do. Excuse me, sir.
The first item is regarding a buffer along, I don't see a arrow on here, but I believe it's along the north side of the property. We had spoke of earlier regarding a request from one of the property owners, and then consequently through me to you, that we plant evergreen trees. We say 4-inch caliber, 8 feet tall, or I'm gonna clarify the 4-inch caliber, somewhere thereabouts, along that property line. Is that something that's any problems with that from your standpoint? I'd like
No.
to make that a stipulation in this zoning.
That is fine on the west side of the property.
Is it the west?
Yes.
Okay, excuse me. Couple of other issues. One being that 10-foot buffer around the property. I've spoken with the city engineer, and following, I say following the clearing of the property, we would like to bring an arborist into that area and take a look at any dead trees that are posing danger to the adjacent property owners, and have those removed. Any issue with that?
No.
Thirdly, I know there's not a decision on whether or not it's going to be a detention or a retention pond at this point. We would like to have that detention or retention pond fenced and screened landscaping wise, with the exception of a 12-foot gate to get into that property to do cleaning.
Yeah, I think based on the ordinances that you and I discussed, we would follow those according to, and to be honest, I don't know what that is, Corky.
I spoke with the engineer about it. We don't actually have a requirement that if it's over 3 foot, it be fenced, but it's kind of common practice among most engineers if it's over a 3-foot pond. And I noticed yours, well, if I could get it to move on my board, looks like it's 6, 8, 10 feet deep, and I would like to have a fence around that property if we get one there, and put some landscape screening. No trees, but something to just screen that fencing away there.
Yes.
Okay.
It probably just cost you $80 for that, yes.
A little more than that. Yeah, I wish it was just $80.
And finally, and then for everyone's information, these things change up till the very last minute. We have not spoken about this in any detail at all, but I understand that you had a meeting this afternoon regarding some fencing along Mr. Dunn's property. Is that something that y'all have agreed upon, or are you willing to agree to work with him on that fencing?
I think pending any issues related to permits, the 100 or so feet of fencing that he was requesting, 6-foot privacy fence, standard fencing would be acceptable.
Okay. That's all of the real questions I have at this point. I do have a list of items here before we conclude this. I'd like to read out to the audience, but I'll open the floor for anybody else that has any questions.
We have a different builder than we had a year ago.
Yes, sir.
Would you tell us who another sitting over there?
Yes, Jimmy Halligan with Craftmark Development. He has built some very high-end homes in the Peachtree City area. Has put together some proposal for some very nice houses. Early on in our conversations, before an offer was ever accepted on the property, he put together a proposal of what was going to go into the property, and we found that the layouts and the designs that he was working with will exceed the current new development even in this area.
Anyone have any questions of either Mr. Sams or Mr. Tindall?
Yes. The fence that y'all were just talking about, could you tell me where that is exactly? That's what we were just
Is
trying
on
to
the north side of Mr. Dunn's property, on the rear and right side if you're facing his house.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's
that's what-
approximately 105, 110 feet of fencing.
Oh, okay. That's what, all right, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Sams?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll hear now from those folks that were sworn in that would like to give testimony. If you just come forward and just tell us who you are, where you live at, and we allow 5 minutes. And I think the last time we did this, we stayed up here till everybody had an opportunity to speak, and that's what we'll do again tonight. So, Howard.
I'm Howard Betts. I live at 3760 Richland Circle. I live there with the owner of the property. She allows me. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight, but I will have to tell you, I'm very disappointed to be back up here in opposition to this rezoning for the purpose of RAD conditional. The citizens were told a year ago that Mayor and Council would review and revise the code for RAD and these infill developments, a revision that's long overdue, and I'd like to know what the outcome of that review was. I think you have the ability and the obligation here to protect the citizens by denying this request to build a high-density housing development in the middle of R20 neighborhood. Mr. Sams did a wonderful job of eloquently presenting this, but we left out the fact that this is in the middle of an R20 neighborhood. This incompatible land use will clearly have a negative impact on our neighborhood. The council rightly rejected this application last year, and we were informed that it went to mediation, resulting in a reduction of just one home. And I was hoping we could do better than that. Is that the best we can do? And that was hardly worth the effort. I was asked to recruit the citizens that were here a year ago to rally the troops, if you will, to come forward and speak against this thing, but we were led to believe this was a done deal, and I would just be wasting their time. So I couldn't ask people to do that. If you are going to pass this, as we were led to believe, I think at the very least I have a few things here, and you've already, Mr. Welch, you've already gone over some of this. Mr. Tennell, Mr. Sams have already gone over some of these, but I'd like to read them if y'all bear with me on it. And there's obviously some new stuff in here too that hadn't been touched on. A minimum rear setback of 30 feet plus a 10-foot rear undisturbed enhanced buffer for a total of 40 feet in the rear property. And I'd like for you to specify that 10-foot enhanced buffer, that there can be no other use for it, like storage buildings and play sets and gardens and other items. And I would ask that you require the developer to plant, according to our city arborist. I'm not in the landscape business, so I'm sure they'd have a better idea about what specimens and species would go in there. But an 8-foot planting that's either evergreen or has leaves on it all year long, and that 4-inch caliper that you referred to, I'm not really sure what that is, but it sounded good. Something like on 10-foot centers, and I think somebody in the landscape business could design something, far better than I could, but we're looking for some vegetative screening in there. And I'd ask that, if any of these plants die within the first year, that the developer would replace them. And you touched on this, but if you would, just stipulate that any dead or dying trees, diseased trees, that we can get the city arborist to come in there and deem that they need to be removed or in that 10-foot buffer area prior to construction beginning, and that, if it's their recommendation that some of these specimen trees would stay there, we'd be okay with that. And I'd ask that you specify a protective fence be installed to identify this 10-foot buffer, and ask that shall remain through and to the completion of construction. We would ask that you would leave the existing chain link fence that borders the property line. We'd ask that the stormwater pond be detention, not retention. I understand that falls back on the city engineer, but regardless of the depth of this thing, we would ask that you put up a fence around it and put vegetative screening. We'd like to be ensured that all adjoining properties will be protected from stormwater runoff. I'd like for you to specify that all houses have four-side architectural so that the back looks as good as the front, because I'm going to have one 30 feet from my house, and I'm going to be looking at it. You know, no vinyl siding, and I understand that you addressed this, Mr. Welch. And we'd also ask that all four sides of the yard be sodded. We'd ask that the construction hours be limited Monday through Friday from 0700 to 1900 hours, 0800 to 1700 hours on Saturday, and absolutely no construction on Sunday, please. We'd ask that all construction vehicles, equipment, deliveries, loading, and unloading be done on the construction site and not on public streets. I would ask that you'd have a minimum of a 3,000 square foot house with 2-car garages. And on those 2-car garages, I'd like for you to specify that they could never be used for anything other than vehicle parking, not change them into living space, or workshops or band practice or whatever you do in a garage. We'd ask that you specify that all the exterior lightings be the type that shines down and it doesn't shine into my bedroom windows from the street lights and the lights that are placed on the homes. We'd ask that you specify that the developer may not alter the site plan by repositioning the houses, changing the setback distance, or relocating the entrance. And we would also ask that there be a mandatory HOA with protective covenants that include these stipulations. It goes without saying that the residents of Bennett Woods and the adjoining property owners on Pineview would prefer this property remain R20 as it was intended to be. But if that's not to be, we'd ask that you include these stipulations, and I don't think we've asked for anything that's unreasonable or expensive. And I'd appreciate all the help I can get, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else that was?
My name is Alan Dunn. I live at 3726 North Cooper Lake Road the last 29 years. And as far as the settlement that you've worked out here, it's protected me pretty good. And with the fence, I'm okay. But I must say that if I had a choice, I would prefer that this not go forward. And I would prefer that the city had taken it to court, because I feel with all of the information we had a year ago that you could have prevailed in court, and we would not have this coming into our neighborhood. Bennett Woods and the surrounding neighborhoods, they're the ones that are going to suffer much more than me. And I'm speaking for them more than myself on that. As far as if it does go forward, which I feel like it is, I just wanted the fence to protect my grandchildren's safety, reduce the noise from the subdivision, and also have privacy. I've got a couple of pictures just very quickly I'll share with you to show you my backyard. My house is 50 years old, and it was built very close to the back of the lot. And yeah. If you can see on the screen here, my house sits just to the right edge of this picture, and that's my backyard. That's my backyard there, and you see the chain link fence behind the treehouse. That's where the subdivision will be put in. The trees you see in the back and to the right, they will be cut down, and so that's why I asked for a 6-foot fence along that 45 feet from where that 8-foot fence is. That's Brenda and Nancy's fence, and to go 45 feet along the back. And then 65, the other picture, if you show the side of my house. This shows I'm standing approximately where the fence would be, and the new road will come that close to my bedroom window. So I was asking for some privacy and protection with a fence, and I appreciate you guys raising that issue, and I appreciate Sean meeting with me earlier today to go over it. So the only other item that I thought I would at least mention, I noticed that on the pavilion area where they have it located is pretty close to where my fence is, where my backyard is. if there's any way possible to shift that pavilion area a little more to the center where it would be between my lot and the house, number 14, house number 14, if you can shift that pavilion area, because I feel like if you've got teenagers and, the people in the community, if they're going to hang out at the pavilion, I'd rather it be a little bit further from my house. That's the only other request I have. And thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Kay Clapper. I live at 3927 Plumcrest, and I'm a little appalled. It seems like y'all have already made your decision. What happened to representative government? We elected you to represent our interests, not the interests of a developer and construction companies. And Mr. Tyndall, I think in court, argued against his due process rights. However, in zoning issues, the pertinent question is not whether rezoning would increase the value of his property, but whether the existing zoning serves to deprive a landowner of the rights without due process. Evidence that the subject property would be more valuable if rezoned is irrelevant. The only relevant evidence regarding the value of the property is the value as it is currently zoned. He can build 10 to 12 houses on this property right now. My issue is cutting down 100-year-old trees, putting houses 10 to 15 feet apart in an area that is surrounded by R20. All four sides of this property is surrounded by R20. That is not what your zoning code allows. It allows for the property to remain R20. We are an established 60-year-old development in Bennett Woods and the surrounding area. We have trees on our property. We are mainly senior citizens on fixed incomes. We don't have a lot of money to hire expensive attorneys and experts to prove special damages. Special damages will occur to Mr. Dunn's property and any other property that abut this area. And I also, in a previous meeting, Mr. Fennell said that he lived in one of these kinds of homes in a development similar to this. So in order to not have the perception of impropriety, I think he should recuse himself from this vote. And anyone else that is not impartial and that does not show an independent viewpoint should not vote. You should not have an opinion in favor of this without hearing all of us. And I want you to vote no for this. Thank you.
Can Mr. Tucker quickly reference the issue of recusal because someone lives in a newer home?
I'm not certain, having not heard the comment that was made, exactly what Mr. Fennell may have said. Was it just that he lives in a home that's designed similar? I just didn't follow what he'd said.
Yeah, come up here so we can hear you.
He gave the impression in that meeting that he liked living in that kind of a subdivision, a development, and therefore he was for this. So I don't want him to vote if he has bias and in favor of this project because he lives in a house similar to this project.
Okay. If you'd like me to address it, I'm happy to.
If Mr. Fennell will clarify what he said, that'd be helpful.
I was referring to the fact that I live in a community that's a planned community. It has a newer style of home of the competent quality and comparable quality that we're talking about. That doesn't require me to recuse myself. It's just an observation that many other people who have moved to Smyrna in the last 20 years, I among them, live in a home like that, not a traditional split or regular ranch like the majority of Bennett Woods
Can
is.
you stay impartial and not already have an opinion, which I believe you've already made?
Well, I think the style of home and the newness of the home has nothing to do with me making an impartial decision.
Yes, sir.
I'm Scott Crooks, 4049 Winding Valley Drive. And I spoke at the last meeting, and I appreciate Corky. I've run several things past Corky, and I appreciate his responses back. I want to thank you all for your time. I looked at what was presented to the city in terms of a table, in terms of the other developments that are nearby that have the RAD zoning. But one of the big differences is this development actually has R20 lots next to it on all four sides, whereas Tackett Farms has a major thoroughfare, and the stuff across the street from Tackett Farms is not R20. And as you go down North Cooper Lake, you've got a major thoroughfare on at least one side of several of those developments. So it's not. I disagree that it's the same thing, and I disagree that you can look at that and say that it should be comparable. This development is completely surrounded. It is truly infill. The other thing that I would say is it is if as they said in our meeting that we had a couple of Mondays ago, if they really are going to build $600,000 homes, it is very economically feasible to stay at 10 to 12 units. There is no reason why this development needs 14 units. And I'm also sad because honestly, it sounds like we lost when this was approved by planning and zoning. Because while you did fight for us and you did choose to deny this development, the court process has not gone. We have a group that was appointed in planning and zoning. So they're not responsible. They're responsible to you because you all appointed them. But as voters, they're not responsible to us. And then we've gone to court, and we now have a retired judge who's not responsible towards us as voters. And so we've now got two jurisdictions or two groups that are going to get this zoning to go through. And even if, my understanding is if this goes through, or even if you deny it, it's really a fait accompli. And I'm sorry, that's not the way this process is supposed to work. The residents should have input. And while we have, we're asking for moving of pavilions and putting up fences, but that's not really what we want. We want less development. That's what we were asking for. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Laura Lamb. I live on 526 Pineview Drive. My property will have two homes in this place within my backyard, 30 feet high or higher. Homes in the R20 zoning are usually no more than 12 to 15 feet high. All this comes down to is whether this property should be rezoned. As a community, we had a full case in front of you last fall on why it should not be rezoned to RAD. Yet here we are again. I have yet to hear a compelling argument like we researched and showed to you guys from the other side wanting to rezone RAD other than for money purposes. This property was bought as an R20 property. He knew what he was buying, and as he bought it as such. So nothing was new to him when he bought it. Has not been any other reason why to change to RAD other than he wanted to develop and get money out of it, which is okay. But as a community, as a neighborhood, we're asking for you to leave it as what it is intended for and as he bought it as R20 and develop it as such. the council should be voting based on the community and the taxpayers and the voters who voted you in last year. It was a 4-3 vote. It was close. But all of you know that a lot of effort was put into it, and a lot of supporters were against this, and they continue to be against this. They might not be here because, like Howard already said, in the meeting last week, or whenever we met with the town hall meeting, we were led to believe it was a done deal, and I hope and still believe that it is not, because you have not voted. Something also that was stated earlier, it was stated that this development currently stands to 8,350 feet of minimum lot space, which equals approximately 43,560 feet. The density was stated that it was 2.6 lots per acre. Doing my math, and my husband actually did the math first, this is actually 5.2 lots per acre, and that's double, which actually does not fit into the R20 and the surrounding areas. Another thing I wanted to address tonight was public safety. It hasn't been really addressed, and it keeps getting moved over to education is this side. Traffic we can't address because it's not over 75 homes. Well, yeah, it's not 75 homes, but if you add up the 3 current North Cooper Lake new developments, it's way over the 75 homes, and we are seeing a public safety with the traffic already coming in. 2, I spoke with current public safety officials this afternoon. And if you take the time to listen to your employees, they will also tell you that they are not in agreement. I will not say who they were for their safety, and because they're actually fear speaking out, but they oppose this development. They told me that the public safety, they have a concern for the public safety for fire, traffic, and people's lives when they have to answer to any of the current calls that they get because of the density and how close they are, including fire, the way the houses are being built with the materials they're being built with, and the time that they have to help, etc. And my other concern was it's somewhat skipping the planning and zoning like last time, because it was a similar proposed development. It was said it need to go back to planning and zoning. And this is where I get kind of confused, because if it's that similar, then it hasn't really been addressed to our needs. But it's different enough to be okay for us, but not to go through planning and zoning as the residents would like to start at the beginning for our due process. And through all this process of mediation and everything else, not once was the neighborhood addressed to speak with our council members on what we would have liked during mediation. We were just in silence, actually. We didn't even find out about this till the sign was put back up a few weeks ago, which didn't really give us much time to address it as strong as we did the last time. So I highly encourage you guys to vote no. If you say no and were to court, I believe you would win there, considering the amount of information your community will support you with and be behind you 100% with a no decision. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else that was sworn? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Brenda Peel. I live at 3744 North Cooper Lake Road. Probably this new development is going to impact me as much as it's going to impact anyone else. I live on 3/4 of an acre on Bagwell. I'm the only person that lives on Bagwell now that Sean has moved. But I'm not against it. But I do have some concerns. And my biggest concern is Bagwell. That's my driveway. And I don't see the new development being interested in paying taxes and keeping it. I guess putting more asphalt on it, keeping like now Sean's father, he keeps it the grass all cut. The new people that are moving in, those 14 houses, are not going to care about my driveway. basically. And so I've spoken to the developer and about deeding that property to me, as he is going to deed other property to other homeowners. And he said that we could work something out, and that he would be okay with that, as long as he could still get to the detention pond, which I have no idea what the difference is. So I just want to state that I'm not opposed to it. I just have real concerns that, I have to be able to get to my property. So that's it.
Thank you.
You want to say anything about it, Jimmy? It'd make me feel better if you publicly say something.
Garbs, we need to swear him out somewhere. Just for the record, just identify yourself.
I'm Jimmy Halligan, representing Craft Martin Development, and I did speak with this lady, and I'd have no problem working with her to somehow deed it to her or keep it updated. It's I have to have access to the pond, and until all that's worked out through the platting, I can't promise to give something away and then have no access. But if I have access to the property from Plumcrest or some other area, absolutely, it's in my best interest to give it to her and all be good neighbors. So if there's a way to, I don't know how you write that up, but I'm making that statement publicly. So
would Ms. Peel, would you grant an access easement for that purpose, for maintaining that facility?
Yeah, absolutely, I would.
I'm sure an amendment could be crafted accordingly.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Y'all have any questions for me?
Not yet.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Mary Ellen Nelson. I live at 3777 Plumcrest Road Southeast, and I spoke with y'all last time about retention/detention ponds and how the CDC doesn't approve of the mosquitoes growing in them, et cetera, and that they're dangerous to children. And Corky has addressed, kind of sketchily, in my opinion, that a fence will be built around it, but we haven't addressed what kind of fence and how secure it will be, because I live 2 houses away from where this 10,000 foot, 8 to 10 foot deep possible pond may be, and I have a lot of care of 2 grandchildren who run much faster than me, age 2 and age 5. So I'm concerned that this potential hazard to their health needs to be very secure. I don't want a chain link fence that they can crawl up, because they can already crawl over the chain link fences between all the yards in the neighborhood in 30 seconds or less, and the fences are about yay high. So I would ask that if this goes through, that a complete privacy fence would be built around this whole pond with locks on it, and with proper mosquito control, and possibly if any standing water is in there, because 8 to 10 feet is pretty deep, so you're going to at the very bottom have some sort of muddy stuff, that they address a regular mosquito control on a regular basis. And this, I think that this possibly ought to be in something that Smyrna develops for all the new developments, because we all are putting our health at risk every time you put in a new pond that has muddy standing, even an inch or 2 of standing water in the bottom. And I have looked around town to see the various detention/retention ponds that have been put in at Cooper Lake Place and Forest, various other small developments, and most of them have privacy fences already, and what you see is grass growing out from underneath, and if you peek over them, and most of them aren't quite tall enough to keep a kid out, because kids, they're drawn to water, animals, frogs. At any rate, if you put this in, please make it safe for our children. That's what I'm concerned about. And I don't support a development of 14 houses. I would like to see this be 10 or 12 if it has to be there at all. I realize it's probably going to be built on. It's his property, as you know. You guys have said he has the right to build on it. But I would ask that you consider that you don't cramp everybody in so that as soon as their kids get big enough to need a backyard, they have to move out somewhere like Cumming because there's no space for their kids to play. 6,900 and some feet of common area is not very much. And most of these houses don't have much of a yard. So where are these kids going to go play? At the pond? At any rate, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm Harry Rowland. I live at the corner of Plumcrest and Cloudland, 3766 Plumcrest Road. I've heard a lot of good comments tonight about why not to do this project, and I'm not going back over all of those.
Just for the record, will you tell us what your name is? We got your address.
Harry Rowland.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
It's been stated that when the property was bought, the owner knew it was zoned for R20, and I would not have a problem with building 10 houses or so in that spot. It's been mentioned that it's an island, and really it is, with R20 around it. And the problem with, there's only two access places you can get to this property. One is on Plumcrest, and one is on Cripple Lake. And since I live on Plumcrest, I'm concerned that that's going to be the main access for quite a while. I'm also, as much as I didn't like the first developer that was going to build this project, I seem like I like the second one even less. Mr. Welch, when we had the meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we appreciate you emceeing that for us, but when someone asked this guy what the cost of the homes was going to be, he said it's going to be as much as he can get. Well, finally, he did come up and say about $500,000. We didn't get a lot of commitment from him about what he was going to provide as far as protection around the pond, as far as buffers. And even when somebody even pressed him on, well, what happens if you build half a dozen sites or buildings or houses and then you can't sell anymore? He said, well, I'll sell it. So I didn't get a real sense of commitment out of him on hanging in and doing this project, which is going to be right in the middle of a major developed area. Stormwater, we talked about that. There's only one way the stormwater can come, and that's coming down Plumcrest. There is a 12-foot easement on each side of Plumcrest that this 24-inch line will be running through. It's on city property, but I've cared for it for 40 years, you know, cut the grass and everything else, but I'm sure that's going to be where it's going to have to go. I know this has gone through a mediation, and I certainly got the feeling in that meeting that this mediation was going to be the guidelines of what the developer was going to do, and not any more than that. Because I know that the final decision lies within this body. And I certainly hope that we get a favorable vote from you people tonight. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Cohn. I live at 3825 Plumcrest Road. I've lived there for the past 46 years with my wife, Judy. My concern centers around a 100-year-old red oak tree in our front yard. This tree is 16 feet from back of curb, and in 2015 I learned that there was going to be a stormwater drain going down the middle of Plumcrest. I made my concerns known, which resulted in a meeting with the developer at that time and an arborist at our house. At that meeting, the conclusions were that the damage to the tree would be minimal, but the arborist's recommendations were the tree's critical root zone should be inoculated, and while the trench is open, an arborist should review the roots and take any appropriate measures to protect the tree. The previous developer said he would provide the treatment and have an arborist on site when they were doing the construction in front of my house. On Tuesday, September the 13th, I sent an email to you, Mayor Bacon, to Councilman Welch, Eric Randall, and Rusty Martin. And I included the email I received from the prior developer, the arborist report, and my concerns. And what I'm asking for is that all possible precautions be made to protect this tree from any construction damage.
Or address that now? Or Jarvis?
We'll let everybody
Okay,
speak, you know.
okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyone else?
Had not planned to speak, but as y'all know, I'm not good at keeping my mouth shut. Allegra Goodman. I live at 3847 Plumcrest Road. A few things. I would like to know why the rights of one property owner outweigh the others collectively. I also, after sitting here, feel like we should request this vote to be tabled until an attorney from Bennett Woods can look over the judge's response. I also want to know if any of you accepted donations for your campaigns from Judge Ingram. And Derek Norton, I know you're a personal friend of Sean Tintel, so I want to make sure you can make an impartial vote. That's all I have.
Anyone else that was sworn in? Like to make any testimony? Mr. Sams, you want to address some of these issues? I don't know how you want to do this, Corky.
No, I'll be pleased to, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to do that and appreciate the interest, the vested interest that the community has in this. Very, very clearly passionate, very clearly well-founded. First of all, let me begin, if I could, with Mr. Bettis. We're agreeable to just about everything he said. If I could just go through that, Mr. Mayor. First of all, he wants the buffer, the 10-foot buffer around the perimeter of the property, and he wants the arborist, I think, to have some input into that. It's going to be a natural, maintained buffer. In other words, utilize the best we can the vegetation that's in place, and then enhance that with any other planning. So that's going to be done. Obviously, it's subject to your arborist review and approval. Once evergreen trees with 4-inch calipers, that's something that we, not as arborists, would have to defer to your arborist for that. He stated that any plants that are dead or trees that are irrevocably diseased or dying be removed. That's certainly acceptable. Protective fencing regarding the buffer. If we did the protective fencing regarding the buffering, it had to be on the property line, and we think it's more appropriate that the buffer be recognized because so many times homeowners forget their buffers. So we will agree to put a recital in any deeds of conveyance that makes specific reference to the buffer, in monumentation and or signage on the lots that show the buffer is there. As far as fencing, that certainly not going to put on our side, and on the fence, on the property line, common property line, I don't think would be appropriate. But the buffer needs to be recognized, and we understand that. People have a propensity to get into buffers if there's not sufficient monumentation or signage to denominate those. The pond and detention, it will be detention, not a retention pond. Obviously, we'll follow Mr. Randall, your city engineer's recommendation with respect to stormwater detention, downstream considerations, hydrological considerations. But at the end of the day, it'll be Mr. Randall during plan review that will tell us exactly what type of pond, but there'll be water quality components as a part of those ponds as well. Four-sided architecture, to me, four-sided architecture is not identical treatment on all sides. It's equal treatment on all sides of the homes. And if you've seen the architectural renderings and elevations, that's what you're going to have. No construction on Sundays, absolutely a reasonable request, and we'll agree to that. In terms of the deliveries, we shouldn't encroach upon existing streets, Plumcrest, North Cooper Lake, or any streets. All the deliveries, all the construction, vehicles, materials, workers, and whatnot will be staged within the property itself, and we'll agree to that as a condition of the zoning. And also in terms of deliveries on site. And once a mandatory homeowners association, there will be a mandatory homeowners association as a part of this with strict architectural controls and covenants, conditions, and restrictions as well. The last thing he mentioned, I believe, was a minimum of 3,000 square foot homes. The builder, Mr. Halligan, needs to have the latitude to build homes, and they will be in the price range of between $500,000 and $600,000. But we need the latitude to be able to have that as a minimum, because we anticipate that there may be someone, even though following the architectural style and composition, is going to want a smaller product. The people, old people my age, sometimes are looking to be in a quality, high-end neighborhood, but at the same token, not looking to dissuade their grandchildren from visiting them, but by the same token, they don't need that much. So the square footage we've agreed to in the range we think is appropriate. We have agreed in terms of Mr. Dunn. I think Mr. Tintle met with him in terms of the fencing, and we're agreeable to what he articulated in that respect. And obviously, the pavilion is where it is now, but I think ultimately, as a part of changes and/or tweaking during the plan review process, that could conceivably be moved. And if it's moved into a situation that's more advantageous for him, and it doesn't impinge upon anyone else's property rights, then we're agreeable to tweaking that or moving that during plan review. I think the way the stipulations and conditions are set up, your community development director has the authority that, even though we're saying this will be in substantial conformity to the site plan, by the same token, Mr. Sudworth has the ability during plan review to make modifications, revisions that are of a minor nature. I believe that that covers the things that I can think of, except for one thing, the fencing around the detention pond. I understand, I apologize for not remembering her name at the moment, but the concern about having that accessible to the city for terms of maintenance, but by the same token, screened from view, and by the same token, it being safe. So we will follow your staff's recommendation on the type of fencing. More often than not, most jurisdictions ask for black vinyl chain link fence that's covered with vegetation. The vegetation matures, the fence becomes virtually invisible. But we'll follow your staff's recommendation on how that's best to be screened from view. If I've missed something, I apologize for that, but I think Mr. Halligan says he has to have access to his pond, but it sounds to me like Mrs. Peel is amenable to that, and that may be something that's worked outside of the zoning. If you want to include a stipulation that the builder will cooperate with Ms. Peel to satisfy and resolve her concerns as long as he has access, then that's certainly satisfactory. Of course, there are other stipulations and conditions they want with respect to limiting it to 10 to 12 houses, and as I mentioned early on, we can build 12 houses now without going through an entitlement process. So you've got this, if you choose, tied up in ribbons, and I mean that not in a pejorative fashion, but in a good fashion, and the city saw to it that you as a city are protected with this. And so, again, with those, not caveats, but with those additions, we do ask and respectfully request that you approve the rezoning as presented. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Questions of Mr. Sams?
Mr. Sam, you know, if this were a in-town neighborhood on Atlanta Road, Concord, Spring, you wouldn't even think twice about 14 houses. But you're not building in an in-town neighborhood. You're building in a neighborhood that has existed for, 40 years or so, as more open. And I'm just wondering if Mr. Tintle would really seriously consider 12 max.
He has.
Yeah. Makes neighbors happy. Make us happy.
And I understand
or make
that.
me happy.
He has looked at that from a business pro forma standpoint. We wouldn't be here asking for something that was not compliant with the future land use or future development map. We wouldn't be asking for something that wasn't compliant with the examples you see forth in the two tables that you have in your zoning analysis. If it was incompatible to that extent, then I wouldn't be here espousing it as an appropriate decision from a land use planning perspective. But
well, I mean, a $600,000 house that's going to be built on top of another $600,000 house, it doesn't seem to be real good planning.
They're pretty big.
Well,
I mean, and looking in the memo, compared to the other developments that have gone in around there recently, they're pretty decent sized lots.
I tend to defer to your, not that I wouldn't defer to you, but your professionals and their decisions and recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else? Ms. Wilkins?
Hi. When I was listening to Howard Betts, and you did address a lot of his items that he mentioned.
Yes, ma'am.
But I think what I heard him say is he was asking for a 30-foot rear setback plus a 10-foot buffer, which would be 40. So I'm just wanting clarification on that, if that's a possibility on that in that area.
We'll have the setbacks as reflected in what staff has recommended, and concurrent with that or within, as a part of that, there'll be the 10-foot buffer that will be a natural
and that will be
maintained buffer.
the 10-foot buffer will be part of the 30, not
Yes,
in
ma'am.
addition to
Yes,
that.
ma'am.
Okay. And the other item that I think I've heard him say was he's asking about the garages, and I don't know if this is possible, but that I don't know if it could be in the HOA agreement, but that the garages could never be converted for other living space other than vehicle parking. Anyway, that's in his notes here, so I don't know if that's a possibility.
I missed that. It's not only a possibility, and we'll agree to that as a condition or stipulation become a condition of the zoning, so there'll be room for at least 2 vehicles to be parked in that. And I'm not going to say someone might not have a bicycle hanging on the wall, but it will park 2 vehicles. The driveway will also park 2 vehicles as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's a reasonable. I can't read my writing sometimes.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions, Mr. Sams?
Not of Mr. Sams, but I'll wait till he finishes up.
Thanks, sir.
Ken, can I ask a question of you? Mr. Combs came up and spoke about the tree alongside of the road. Now, I do understand we're likely to go to the other side of the road from a tree at this point, and that will help. But there were stipulations in the original rezoning request. Are those stipulations still bound to this request? Yes.
Yeah. What I listed out tonight and what you have is the conditions for tonight. Anything from the last year conditions that have not been referenced that you think are valid, you'll need to bring those forward.
Okay. And are you familiar with that situation at all, or was that the city engineer that was dealing with that issue?
I'll ask Rusty, who is our senior planner, because Rusty was heavily involved in that last year. I don't personally recall that up.
I understand. Could you give me a brief summary of what went on there?
Well, when we were going through the review of the improvement down Plumcrest, we identified putting a pipe in the street and which side of the street that it needed to go on to create less impact for the residents down Plumcrest. Mr. Cohn identified his tree and was worried about the impact. And when we were out there doing those assessments, we agreed to come back out and meet with him at a later date to let the arborist review the tree and see the health and see what potential impacts. The developer met with him personally and agreed to those improvements, but they weren't part of the original zoning stipulations. They were something that he agreed to in private.
Okay, are we, I don't know if we're still on the same side of the road with the piping, or have we shifted to the other side?
I don't know that that's been determined at this point. It'll probably be determined at permitting when it comes in for plan review and stuff like
and
that.
was the arborist, the city arborist that came out?
The city, I think the city arborist came out, and I think the developer had a private arborist as well.
Okay.
This was the previous developer, though, right?
Correct.
Yes, this was Venture Homes.
Okay, that's all I have.
I mean, so the question would be, I would have, would be, would you guys honor the previous agreement, whatever it was, with the homeowner and the tree?
You'll recall Venture Homes, Mr. Sean Randall made the presentation, handled the zoning. We will agree to meet with Mr. Cohn and do whatever we can to stay out of the critical root zone. So that's what I can tell you that we'll do, because I don't have the answer to that right now. But we can work in conjunction with the arborist, because Lord knows you want to save a tree that's 100 years old for certain. I just saw a show this morning. I think Good Morning America. There's a tree that predates the signing of the Constitution. 600 years old. It's the oldest hardwood tree in the United States, and unfortunately, it's about ready to meet its demise. So I would hate to be here 500 years from now and be
Right.
worried about that.
I don't want that laid on me either.
No, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but we'll be glad to talk more with Mr. Cohen about it and do our level best to stay out of the critical root zone, because that really is the.
I don't know whether or not Sean Randall wants to speak, because once he gets started talking, you forget about what you were talking about. But I know that we spent a lot of time during mediation about the water runoff and where it was going to go, who it was going to affect. And we talked about the trees. We talked about there's 2 or 3 houses are extremely, they don't have any backyard at all. The houses on Pineview, I mean, they're going to be impacted like nobody's business, but the property is always, it's always been what it's been. And once somebody goes in, whether you build 8 houses or whether you build 14, you're going to see a tremendous change in that property. It's going to be table graded because of all the infrastructure they have to put in.
But during the mediation process, Mr. Mayor, an engineer by the name of Chuck Rand took an independent look at this, I think at the behest of the city. And so I would defer to Mr. Jones, your city administrator, as to what those ultimate results were. But from stormwater management perspective, but I'm just telling you that we will meet with Mr. Cohen on the tree issue, since that apparently was outside of the stipulations and conditions as part of the planning and zoning board.
Okay. Right. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make one last long comment. At least from my standpoint, and I'm going to go over the list that's been touched upon a couple of times tonight. The first request of the property owners out there was the minimum of a 30-foot setback plus a 10-foot undisturbed, and I only held the developer to the 30-foot. I put that in writing back to Mr. Betts on Friday, and then copied him with an updated version of that this afternoon. The second item was a request to provide evergreens along a 10-foot buffer along the western property of 8-foot tall, 4-foot caliber. We've gone over that this evening. The developer has agreed to do that. Third item is item that stipulates any dead, dying, or diseased trees to be, we'll bring in a city arborist to review those and provide a request that the owner take care of those during the construction process. Next was a protective fence be installed to identify this 10-foot buffer and to remain, actually to protect the trees. And I think, Sean, this is not a requirement on my part, but I think that's going to be a requirement on the part of our existing zoning ordinances that those be, there be a protective fencing along there. Silt fencing will only be required on an area on the side of the downhill side of the property. Next is the chain link fencing bordering the property to remain intact. I felt like that if the developer was willing to leave it up out there behind this buffer, that was fine. If there were other areas that he wanted to take it down in, I was not going to make that a stipulation in my anything tonight. Finally, the stormwater pond, mention it being detention or retention. I'm going to leave that up to the engineer and not get into that I shouldn't be getting into. But we would require that it be fenced with a privacy fence and provide landscape screening. Next, to be sure that adjoining properties are protected from stormwater runoff. And the answer here is we're going to retain more water on this property or protect it and divert it from the street more than what's diverted now. I can't say that there's not going to be any runoff on some small hills that are adjacent to some property owners at this point, but for the most part, they're going to be better off than what they are now. I think in all cases, they'll be better off than what they are now. Finally, all the houses to be four-sided architecture, what Mr. Sam said is just a few minutes ago, that there would be no vinyl siding, and I don't think that's of issue. the houses and the city current requirements require that we have architectural styles for each different side of the house, and that no house can have cementitious products facing the street. Stipulations do require siding of all the yards at this point. The construction hours that I got in here, the only change from what the residents requested was a 1 hour on Saturday, and I was not going to make that 1 hour a question. Finally, the houses, the residents requested that houses be a minimum of 3,000 square feet, 2-car garages. Mr. Sam spoke of the 2-car garages. Houses a minimum of 3,000 square feet. That is a larger house than any zoning within the city, and I just didn't feel that was a fair request of this development. Next is exterior lighting, be the type that does not allow light to direct into the houses. If you read in the stipulations, we already stipulate a non-glare type light be provided. Developer may not alter the site by repositioning houses. That's an issue that if he decides to come back and change the lots, that he would be required to come back before the city council for a second approval. Finally, that there's a mandatory HOA with protective covenants, and I think that goes without saying. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I have no further questions.
You need to come back up here if you want to speak. You've already been sworn in. And
since an arborist is going to be coming to the area, I'm Brenda Peel, in case you forgot. An arborist is going to be coming to the area. I have three large pin oaks in my backyard that go right against my 8-foot fence, but obviously the roots are going to go in the new area where the houses are going to be built. I'd like an arborist to look at those so I make certain that I don't lose those with the construction. And since one's going to be coming out to Plumcrest anyhow, I'd like to have them come.
Put them over into your lot and let them take a look at your trees.
Absolutely.
I guess we could.
Because I'm very fearful, and I've talked to Sean about it, and I'm very fearful that, with all the construction, those trees will die.
And we have seen some developments where trees were planted on the property line, and they have gone into someone else's property.
Right.
And they got ready to develop it. It did.
I know it happened. So, but there is a buffer. There's going to be a 10-foot buffer. Actually, where my house is where I think the mail is going to be, and where the common area is going to be. That will be kind of very close to my house. But anyway, I just like an arborist to look at it.
I think we could have that.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I clarify?
Before I agree to anything else, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Because our tree ordinance, and I do not expect the public to understand it completely. I don't expect you guys to understand it completely. But within our tree ordinance, there is a boundary tree provision to handle exactly this situation. So anytime trees are identified, if there is a boundary tree associated with any of those lot lines, they have to be illustrated, and there is a technique which includes review by the city arborist. So that will work itself out. You're welcome to add it as a condition if you wish, but it's already embedded in our tree ordinance.
Yeah, I wouldn't say add it as a condition. We just have them look at her trees.
Not be in the habit of adding as conditions things that are already implicit within our own ordinances.
I just have a question.
Okay.
So, per the map, the west side property line by Howard's, they discussed the privacy fence and the 10-foot on center trees. I have not heard any of that protection for the 9 homes affected on the Pineview Drive side on our backyards with any privacy fence or tree to minimize the hit that the majority of this is affecting Pineview Drive to begin with. you addressed the west side but not the north side, which is the entire strip of Pineview.
I have not heard of it either until right now.
Any comment? I mean, I know they have worked, Corky, with the, next to the Betts property, right? And next to the, and Alan Dunn's property. I don't know how much you're talking about, how much property there is.
Well, based on what I understand, Mr. Mayor, from Ken, what he just explained, that to a great extent, our existing tree ordinance, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to take care of a lot of the tree planting and the evergreens in this buffer. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, between the tree ordinance and what's already in the zoning ordinance, any trees that are indeed classified as boundary trees or trees that are within a buffer, all of that issue about what's going to live, not live, that'll be picked up by the city arborist as well, because basically what the tree ordinance is doing is we don't want to create a development that's transferring the responsibility of dead trees to a new owner that then has to come in and take those out. We want that handled up front by the developer so that when a new homeowner comes in and purchases that house, they've got healthy trees in those buffers, and the appropriate steps have been taken to protect the boundary trees on adjacent property.
Okay.
I have a question. Since it was brought up with the citizens' comments and concerns about the donations to campaign contributions, there was an election that in November, which was after this application was filled out. So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of full disclosure. If there was any, if any council members received donations from the applicant or the attorney. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Corky?
Nope. Hearing no other comments, Mr. Mayor, I want to say the first time that this came before us, I voted against this property for two reasons. And those reasons were the property along the west, owned by the Betts family, and a property on either side of the entrance road. And my reason was I felt like that in both cases we were going to reduce the property value of those two properties, or three properties. We went into mediation, and I felt like that we did the best that we could to get those issues resolved as well as other issues along the way. Whether we got everything that the citizens out there want, I'm certain that that's not the case. But I did feel like that we got everything that we could get for the neighborhood and for the area and for the development and for the city and the neighbors. It's not a perfect situation, but again, we got everything that I felt like we could. With that being said, I'm going to make a motion to approve zoning request Z15-007, rezoning from R20 to RAD conditional for the development of 14 single-family homes, 5.61 acres, land lot 338 at 3744 Plumcrest Road, owner by Sean Tyndall, with the following special stipulations, if I can find them. Number one, that we require fencing to be installed along the north and west boundaries of the Alan Dunn property as agreed upon by Mr. Dunn and Mr. Tyndall earlier in the evening. Number two, to require evergreen buffer along the west boundary of the subject property buffer to include evergreens at a minimum of 10 feet on center Evergreen trees shall be a minimum of a 4-inch caliper. Number 3, following the preliminary clearing, city arborists will inspect the 10-foot enhanced buffer and provide additional tree plantings per our existing city ordinance and the removal of any dead trees from this 10-foot buffer. Number 4, that the detention or retention pond shall be fenced with privacy fencing and landscape screening placed around the entire pond, with the exception of a 12-foot entrance to be used for maintenance of the pond. Number 5, that additional property along each side of Beecham Drive to be offered to the adjacent properties. At their request, they may not take it, but that the existing owner offer the property up, whatever's left after the 50-foot right-of-way requirement, that he offer it to those property owners. Number 6, that the developer work with the city arborist to protect the trees located on the right-of-way adjacent to the Combs property. And that's all.
Second.
Motion second. Does that include the other stipulations?
That it includes the other 27 stipulations, I think, that were part of the original packet.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote. That's 5-2 approval, with Ms. Bluestein and Ms. Wilkinson voting in the negative. It's approved 5-2. Okay, next item on the agenda is approved licenses. We have none. I'm sorry, that's item 5. Item 6 is formal business. A is 2016-378, approval reappointment of Ward 5 Representative Danny Fuqua to the Smyrna Tree Board. This is a 4-year term that expires in August of 2020. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you. I'd like to move to approve item 6A 2016-378, approval of reappointment of Ward 5 Representative Danny Figueroa to the Smyrna Tree Board. This is a 4-year term to expire August 2020.
I'll second.
Motion is second. In discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please vote. Seven zero. Item 6B is 2016-383, approval of appointment to Ward 6 Representative Mr. Doug Terry to the Smyrna Housing Authority through the remaining term to expire May of 2020. Mr. Doug Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make the motion to approve 2016-383, approval appointment of Ward 6 Representative Mr. Doug Terry to the Smyrna Housing Authority through the remaining term to expire May 2020.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion. One more.
Who's missing?
It's me. Excuse me.
It's approved 7-0. Item 6C under formal business is the change that we moved from the consent agenda to item F, which is 2016-380, approval of guaranteed maximum price GMP for the historic Reed House Event Center renovation in the amount of $1.5 million. The GMP will include $1 million to Peachtree Construction Services for the maintenance and code compliance construction, $300,000 for CDBG improvement and site work, and $200,000 in project contingency, and authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents. Mr. Jones, give us the background on that, please.
Mr. Mayor, that issue gave just about all the background. There were 3 firms that responded to our CMAR request, and all attended a mandatory site visit on April 22nd of this year. And on May 2nd, that award for Peachtree Construction Services came back before council on May 2nd. And it's the duty of the the construction manager at risk to prepare what's called a guaranteed max price for the project. So they submitted that in early July, and they've been working with Crowe Engineering and Lyman Davis Dooley, our architects, to value engineer what the design would look like and take out some of the things or do things differently to get that cost down. So their part of this $1.5 million is $1 million. And as you stated in the issue, $300,000 of that will be CDBG funds, which are used for ADA compliance and some site work. And we removed $200,000 from the contractor's contingency and placed it in the form of an owner's contingency line item to make changes as we go through the project. The staff has reviewed the guaranteed max price in concert with our engineers, Crowe Engineering, and recommend council approve.
Let's see, that's under Corky Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions among the council? Hearing no questions, I am very proud to make this motion. Approval of the guaranteed maximum price for the historic Reed House Event Center renovation in the amount of $1,500,000. The GMP will include $1 million to Peachtree Construction Services for maintenance and code compliance construction, $300,000 for CDBG improvements and site work, and $200,000 in project contingency, and to authorize the mayor to sign and execute all related documents.
I'll second the motion.
A motion is second. Any further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to. I wasn't fast enough to second, but I'd like to just comment that I recall when we initially purchased this home, or when we were talking about purchasing this home, and I talked to some folks in the newspaper and on television about this purchase, and I was always pretty emphatically supportive of the purchase. And one of the main reasons was because I knew that if this piece of land, if this home were to go into the market, the private market, it would be purchased in accordance with the future land use plan. We would be seeing a request for a rezoning to something pretty high density. We see high density or higher density housing across Atlanta Road from where this property is, and actually almost directly across from where this property is right now. There is a yellow zoning sign for a rezoning we'll be hearing here shortly for a group of townhomes that we're seeing a request for. There is not a doubt in my mind that had the city not purchased this property, we would also be reviewing rezoning requests for townhomes or something of similar density on this same parcel. I am so pleased that we made this purchase. I am so pleased that we are turning this home into something that can be used and enjoyed by everyone in the city, and I'm very happy to vote for this tonight.
Can I add one thing to that? There was a lot of question early on about what exactly we were going to do with this house. I sat down for about 2 minutes this afternoon and made a little list. And what I feel like that will be used for, the list includes just a rotating art gallery. We're having an art show at the Taylor Bronner House starting October 1st. I'm going to try to announce that in a few minutes. Rehearsal dinner, showers, lectures, small concerts, and I do mean small, but still small concerts in the very back room of the house, board meetings, school field trips, art shows. Then the list goes on and on. And again, I am very proud that we've added this to the city's properties, and look forward to using it myself.
All right, we got a motion second. All those in favor of the motion, please vote. It's approved 7-0. Item 7 is commercial building permits. We have none. Item 8 is consent agenda. Mr. Jones, will you please read the consent agenda for council's approval?
Yes, sir, Mayor. There were 6 items. There are 5 because we acted on the Reed House under formal business. So of the 6 remaining consent agenda items, item number A is the approval of the September 6th Mayor and Council meeting minutes. Item B is authorization for Atkins Park Tavern to operate a beer wine station beyond the boundaries of their premises that's covered by the license, and that's to be operated at the Star 94 Woodstock event in downtown Smyrna, Saturday, October 1st. Item C is an award for paving projects at the lowest bidder, Butch Thompson Enterprises, in the amount of $582,095. This is based on their unit price bid that was submitted and approved, and authorize the mayor to execute related documents. Item D is an approval to use council chambers for Thursday, September 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. for a meeting for the residents of Lexington Trace. Item E is approval of architectural services for Fire Station Number 2. This was be awarded to Lyman, Davis, and Dooley in the amount of $106,500 and allow mayor to sign related documents.
Do you hear a motion we approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote. That's approved 7-0. Item 9 is committee reports. We'll start tonight with Mr. Ron Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no Finance Committee report or Community Relations report. I will note that I want to thank the City of Smyrna for helping welcome our Smyrna Business Association unusual meeting instead of a regular luncheon. We did it outside. It was a well-attended event, and we appreciate all of the patrons and the services provided for such an event. I'll also note that in my newsletter I made one additional error that I wanted to correct, and that is autumn is arriving this week. What I put in my newsletter for November is actually the time change when we have to fall back. So if you'll duly note that, and if you're not on my newsletter list and didn't get the most recent missive, contact me. I'm easy to find, ronfennell@me.com, or my phone number's listed in the directory, and I'm happy to provide you a copy of the newsletter. That's it, Mr. Mayor. That's my report.
Mr. Doug Stoner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no reports.
Ms. Susan Wilkinson.
Yes, I wanted to just see if someone that has more information about the Wolfstock event could maybe tell the public about that. That's on October 1st, because I think we won't have another council meeting prior to that. And do you know the information?
I have a lot of the information. But what we can do is make sure that we put it on our website, so anybody that's watching the broadcast, you'll go to our Smyrna City website. We'll have the information there.
Okay. I know it's like an event that you can bring your dogs to, and so anyway, yep, look at our website for that. Thanks. With that, I yield.
Ms. Corky Welch.
No report this evening, Your Honor.
Ms. Terry Nulowich.
No, the Taste of Smyrna was this past weekend, and unfortunately I was at softball games all weekend and I was not able to partake in that. But I know when I went around the downtown on Sunday morning, like everything else, like with Jonquil Festival, it was like there was never even an event. Great job to the city staff for making sure everything was back as it should be after what I understand was a fantastic event. And I am delighted that we are moving forward with the Reed House. I learned tonight that it was one of the first women architects in Georgia who actually designed that house. And guess where she went to college, y'all? She went to Agnes Scott. So that just made it even closer to my heart. With that, I yield.
Mr. Andrew Bluestein.
I'm going to say a special prayer this week that we get some relief from this heat. It's about to kill me. Other than that, Your Honor, I have no other thing to add to the report.
Mr. Derek Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few things tonight. First of all, I want to thank the residents of Galleria Manor for having me at their Labor Day event, September 5th. I want to thank the residents of Farmstead Community for having me September 15th at their neighborhood meeting. And I want to announce a few upcoming Ward 1 meetings. Vinings Point, Monday, October 10th at 7 o'clock. Afton Downs, Tuesday, October 11th at 7 o'clock. Argyle Estates, Tuesday, October 18th, 7 o'clock. And Falling Waters, Thursday, October 20th at 7 o'clock. All those locations I'll put on my Facebook, and I'll send out notices as well. There's also a meeting with Councilwoman Nolowitz and Bluestein and I on October 5th, 6 p.m. at the Community Center. Hope that you can come out to that. I wanted to mention quickly the proposed townhome development on Bell Drive that passed the Planning and Zoning Commission last week. There's been some questions about it. I would encourage you, if you have any comments or questions for me, to contact me, 770-680-0897, dnorton@smyrnaga.gov. Send me an instant message on Facebook. I'm pretty accessible. You can view the minutes of the meeting and the plans at smyrnacity.com under the meeting minutes for planning and zoning. So I just want to make sure that if there's anybody that has any questions, that they contact me. And finally, I want to mention the Smyrna Public Safety Foundation event that was held Saturday, September 10th. Thank everybody that came out to that to support our first responders. Special thanks to Angie Bolton, Barb Allen, Stacy Evans and all the board of directors for everything they did to put this event on. Raised over $80,000 for our fire and police, and that's pretty outstanding. And with that, I yield.
Mike Jones. Yes, Jeffrey Tucker, our new city administrator, who will our new city attorney.
No report tonight, Your Honor.
Yeah. You and Randy need to talk to Mr. Cochran about him going out of town, not telling us. Mr. Terry Graham, anything? Okay. We do not have a show cause hearing. We got some folks that have signed up for citizens input. Alec Backery, 3459 Shawnee Trail, comments?
In my subdivision, Cedar Cliffs, for the last 34 years, we've had no parking signs. We have them on the hill coming in and on my street, which is poorly lit. But again, there's city signs. About 3 weeks ago, there was a car illegally parked at 3 in the morning. We enforce overnight. I don't, for one, don't enforce it during the day, but they're clear no parking signs. And I called it in. And they asked if I wanted to speak to a police officer. I went, no, I think they'll do the right thing. So that morning I went out at 9 o'clock. The car was still there. So I checked with dispatch, no action taken. So I found out who the supervisor was, Owens. And I called him. He did return the call. He says there is discretion with the police officers on his shift. I says, wait a minute. The signs clearly say no parking. Whether they're handicapped, stop signs, they mean something. They're there for a reason. And now we have been with other officers in the past years, giving a person a warning or asked them to move it or giving a ticket. Well, last week it happened again. And it happened to be another officer on Owen's shift. He went by me, looked at it, a large plumbing truck at the same address, and came back and says, I just wanted to see what the problem was. He says, any questions? I says, are you going to give him a warning or anything? He says, and I cannot believe it. He looked at me and says, I don't have to tell you anything. I said, excuse me, I just wanted to know if you're going to take any action on it. Again, I don't have to tell you anything. That was Officer Hill. And then he goes down the hill away from where the vehicle is. What I'm trying to understand tonight, and I did ask a council person who's on the police committee, which gave me an answer tonight, this discretion thing just seems to have come up all of a sudden with one shift. Now let's just say that one house had outside and they didn't do any action on it. The next night the neighbor sees that there was no action, so they park out there. Another shift does the right thing and asks them to move or gives a ticket. Now they're upset saying, why did he not get a ticket and I get one? You're opening up Pandora's box here. There should be clear understanding when you see a sign, whether again, stop signs, red lights, anything, you should enforce it clearly so everyone understands it. There's an old saying, to be consistent is being inconsistent. And I hope the police committee and you, Mayor, have the police officers honor the signs that you put up 34 years ago, that they were there for a reason and should be enforced. When an officer takes the oath of office, it's to enforce all laws. I don't know anywhere in the oath that they say discretion. So I'd hope you all look at it and be consistent, because to me, signs mean something. Again, handicapped, stop signs or whatever. This is clear, no parking. And again, that plumbing truck was out so far in the street that if there was a fire, I don't think the fire truck could have got by unless he drove up on someone's lawn. We did have the city marshal out there when they parked on the front of the lawn, and he was great to enforce it, to say next time go your court. But all of a sudden this discretion needs to be cleared up on all shifts. And I hope, again, the police committee and you, Mayor, look into it to honor the signs that were put up by the city. There's a reason why they're up, and they should be enforced 100%, not discretion of officers. Thank you.
Howard Martin, 3435 Lee Street, Public Safety, his comments or topic.
Good evening, Howard Martin, 3435 Lee Street. First of all, I want to start this way before I get into the meat of what I've got to say. I've been trying to work with the police department for about several years now, and I had the opportunity on this occasion to talk with 3 different people with the police department, and we're trying to work together because we've got an issue that's been ongoing down in my neighborhood for several years, and that's the people running the stop sign. But I want to say this about the gentlemen at the police department. They were very cooperative, and they're going to try to work something. What brought all this about, the other morning, there's 4 children that live in my neighborhood a block away, and they've changed the school bus route. Now they pick them up in front of my house. Red automobile come off the hill from Hickory Circle, running about 40 or 45 miles an hour, and I'm qualified to tell you what speed limits are because I've done NASCAR race pictures for 16 years. That young lady drove through that stop sign 40 to 45 miles an hour, and those 4 kids were standing right there at the stop sign. The other thing, what brought it about, was I came home the other night. Well, it was about 2-3 weeks ago, or 2 or 3 Tuesdays ago, and the food trucks were down Atlanta Road, down at Taylor Bronner. I ain't got any problem with them, but I do have a problem when I request or try to get help for this stop sign, and between the driveway at Taylor Bronner Road and Lee Street and Collier, there were 6 black-white police cars. 6. There was 7 to 8 patrolmen among those 6 to 8. They sat there with those trucks 2 to 4 hours. I couldn't get them at the stop sign for 30 minutes. And again, I want to reiterate what I said to start with. That has since been cleared up because they were very cooperative with the gentleman that I talked to up there. We have foot traffic in our neighborhood, anywhere from handicap to kids running, adults, women with children in strollers up and down our neighborhood. We got a great neighborhood. But I am afraid that somebody's going to get killed right in front of my house. I took a video camera the other morning. Out of the 100 cars that came through that video camera, and by the criteria that a patrolman told me that they go by of running a stop sign, 85 of those people broke the law. The criteria is if that front wheel or those wheels are still turning and you go through that stop sign, you have committed a crime. You've broke the law. How I know that? That happened to me. Right here in this room, in court, they told me that if your wheels do not stop, and this man right here may be one to tell you the same thing, you have run a stop sign. The others come through the stop sign at my house anywhere from 45 to 50 miles an hour. This man right here put a guardrail up in my yard several years ago where 5 people run through my front yard before the guardrail was put up. And after the guardrail was put up, I had to put another one up because they knocked the first one down. But people, the public safety part of it, and these kids now, the way they've changed the school bus routes, somebody's going to get hurt, and it's going to be right in front of my house. I beg you to work with whoever who is on the police committee. And I've talked to the 3 gentlemen at the police department, and they, like I said, they were very cooperative. I understand we may be short a patrolman. And I'd like to see this body right here get our police department more funds along with the fire department, because Johns Creek, Sandy Springs, Marietta, and the Georgia State Patrol even have put 20% across the board to get these people money. They put that badge on and they protect us. There is a bullseye on these guys' back every day they put that uniform on for whatever reason. We got one of the best police departments in this city, anywhere. And I'll back them 100%. I think they need more money, as well as the fire department. But please, who is on that committee, help me out at this stop sign so somebody don't get killed in front of my house. Have a good night. Thank you.
Gary Nelson, 872 Chrysler Avenue, neighborhood decline.
Don't want to keep you all any later than we have to. My name is Gary Nelson, and I live at 872 Chrysler Avenue in Ward 5. I live in the blighted area of Smyrna. The area between Pat Mel Road and Windy Hill Road and South Cobb Drive and Atlanta Road. Within that rectangle, there are more than 1,000 households. The area is mostly poor, immigrant, or minority. The kids in our neighborhoods play in the streets because there are no parks or recreation areas. Not one community park, not even one swing set for over 1,000 households. Now, some people will say, oh, there are parks behind Publix, or there are parks across from Campbell High School, but surely you don't want kids to be crossing South Cobb Drive or Windy Hill Road. Now, this gentleman talked about all the things that could be done at the Reed House. The citizens in my area don't attend Taste of Smyrna. They don't go to Food Truck Tuesday, and they won't use any of those facilities at the Reed House. What they want are clean, safe neighborhoods to raise their children. This mayor and council are failing them in that regard. Now, like I say, the area is mostly poor, immigrant, and minority. It would be easy to accuse this mayor and council of racism, prejudice, and bigotry. But if that's not the case, you need to prove it through your actions. Thank you.
Ms. Cynthia Lawrence, 1350 Overlook Cove, Southeast, comments? Been a long night, hasn't it?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to end this night for you guys on a really good note. I would like to say you handled the situation with the Plum Press property as well as you possibly could. I do not envy your positions in having to make these kinds of decisions. But in order to agree with the gentleman who was just up here, I too live in what I used to believe was a very nice place to live, and that was in Falling Water. Mr. Norton is very familiar with our area, and because of a lot of the rentals that have become available in that area, the property values are being lowered, even though our property taxes are not being lowered. And I commend you, Mayor, for the decades of service that you and the council have worked very diligently to raise the value of Smyrna and the properties here. And I would hope that you would continue to do that, and also to give consideration to those areas that are becoming blighted, because I don't think anybody really wants to live in a blighted area. But it's going to be hard work. I mean, it really is going to be hard work, and I don't envy that position, but if you need any help, I want to be here to encourage you. And I thank you once again for your service, all of you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. That's the last of our folks that have signed up. If there's no other business to be brought before this body, what time's your clock say? Since I don't even have a phone, I don't have a watch, I don't have anything. 9:14, but I was in Wyoming last week, and it's 40 degrees difference in the temperature, and there's no humidity, so I declare this meeting adjourned at 9:14. Will you follow up with Red Martin? You follow up with Red Martin and do something about the, this one out of Roseland.